The topic today, if I had to give today's message, a title, it would be this. It would be for such a time as this. For such a time as this. And this is what I believe, just from a more prophetic sense, just from what God is saying to us as a church. I believe that we're in a unique time as a church, that God is doing some unique things, and I really believe that God is setting us up just to reach people in a new way, in a unique way, that God is active and alive and moving, that I believe that God wants to use our church to expand. He wants to expand our influence to help more people. I believe we're going to see just God do miraculous things in our church. I just believe there's a moment that God is just breathing on our church, and I'm excited to be a part of it. And I really believe a year from now, we're all going to look back and be like, man, come on, God. We're all going to be amazed at what God does. And this is what I hope to be true for you, that it's not just us as a church thing, but you as an individual be able to say the same thing, that God is setting you up for some big things. For such a time as this. And I hope today we really end, I really believe just God is going to speak to you specifically just about you and where you're at and what God's doing in your life. Because this is what I know to be true. God could have picked any time period for you to be born in. God could have picked any place for you to be born in the whole world. He could have picked anywhere. God could have chosen any family for you to be a part of. God could have chosen any church for you to attend. God could have chosen any of that, but he chose all of that very specifically. And I believe that specific purpose, that specific plan that God has for you is tied to his purpose for you. That he orchestrated where you would be born, when you would be born, the city you would be born, the church you would attend, the family you're in. He orchestrated all of that and set it up for such a time as this. That God is orchestrating your life from beginning to end, and he's setting you up for a moment where you can be used by him in a significant way. And I believe that to be true. And so to kind of unpack this idea for such a time as this, to really just kind of explore this thought, I'm going to use one of my favorite Bible stories. It's the story of Moses. And this is where Moses receives his call from God. At this point in Moses' life, he is 80 years old. So if you think you're too old to be used by God, Moses is 80. I mean, I'm 38, and I'm like, oh, man, I'm old. But if you think you're too old to be used by God, Moses is 80. So Moses is 80. He's a shepherd at this point for his father-in-law. And he has this crazy experience. For those of you who are familiar with this story, I'm just going to recap for those of you who aren't. But this story goes like this. Moses is just doing his Moses thing. He's just being a shepherd. And all of a sudden, there's a bush off in the distance, and that bush catches fire, but it doesn't burn up. So there's a fire, but there's no smoke because nothing's burning. And Moses looks at it, and he's like, what the heck is that? It's like, I'm an old man. I ain't never seen bushes on fire that aren't burning. So maybe my old eyes ain't working right. I'm going to go check this thing out. He kind of walks over there. Then all of a sudden the bush starts talking to him. And the bush knows his name. It says, Moses. He's like, man, I had some mushrooms for lunch. I just didn't think it was them funny ones, I apologize, the drug reference. I haven't always been saved, you know what I'm saying? The Lord hath delivered me from all kinds of bondages. Back in the day before I gave my life to Jesus, I was a sinner, and I was really good at it, I figured if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to do it with my whole heart. I've been like that my whole life, and so when I was a sinner, man, I was all in and sinning. Anyway, so Moses, he sees this bush. The bush starts talking to him. He's kind of having this trippy experience. He's like, I don't know what's happening. The bush is talking to me. The bush tells me to take off my sandals. Now he wants me to take off. I don't even understand, why? And so he has this unique experience with God. And what happens with Moses, he ends up hearing God continue this whole thought in verse 7. I want to read it to you because I love this because I believe it's a promise that Moses receives, and it's a promise that many of us wish we could hear. And it's this, in verse 7, it says, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I've heard their cries of distress, of their harsh slave drivers. I'm aware of their suffering. Now pause for just a second. If I'm Moses, the children of Israel at this point have been enslaved for 400 years. If I'm Moses, I'm like, you just now seeing it? I thought you were God. And I'm kind of excited that finally he's seeing it, but then I'm kind of like frustrated at the same time. Like, oh, God, you're finally noticing. 400 years, buddy. That's just me. I just maybe would have had that kind of attitude. So anyway, that's Moses. So verse 8, though, it continues. It says, so I've come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians, to lead them out of Egypt to a fertile and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. I love this because I imagine being Moses and you hear this and you're like, yes, come on, God, do all this God stuff and set us free. I'm excited that God is going to do the God thing and do all this miraculous stuff. We've been enslaved for 400 years. Finally, I guess we whined enough, we cried enough. We finally got God's attention. And I'm sure at one point, again, he's excited, but he's kind of frustrated. And so he's talking to God, and he's like, oh, okay. So he's sitting back, and he's like, finally, God's going to show up. Finally, God's going to set us free. Finally. And I'm sure he's kind of sitting back onto the side, like, almost giving God, like, the slow clap. Get him, God. Get him, God. Get him, you know? It's like building up. He's like, yeah, I can't wait to see how you do it. God, set us free. But the Bible doesn't stop there. Because in verse 10, it says this. God tells him all these great things he's going to do. Verse 10 says, now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh, and you have to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt. And I'm sure all of his exciting clapping for God ends real quick. And he's like, hang on a second. When I was reading the job description for God, God does all the miraculous delivering, setting people free. I watch. I'm not God. That's not on my job description to go set people free. We've been in bondage for 400 years. If I could have done something, I would have done something by now. If I had the ability to do what you were asking me to do, I would have tried. And I did try, and I only killed one guy, and I've been hiding ever since then. I'm sure at this point, he looks in the mirror, and he's like, no. I ain't doing it. I can't do it. I don't think you have the right address. I know you did the bush on fire and you knew my name, but you got the wrong guy somehow still. But see, what Moses found out really quickly is God's plan requires man's obedience. God has all kinds of things he wants to do. And the first thing he does, it says the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. What does that mean? God has plans and purposes and things he wants to do in the earth. But in order to do that, he first looks for a laborer. The moment God has a harvest in mind, he begins to look for laborers to accomplish the harvest that he has. The moment that God has a plan, I want to set them free, I want to save them, I want to heal them, I want to deliver them, I want to do something great in their life. The moment God has that desire in his heart is the moment he starts looking for someone to just say yes. And a lot of times we want to sit back and pray for revival, and God is saying, I don't need you to pray for revival, I need you to go out and do that which I've called you to do. It's easy to sit back and ask God to do it all. It's different when he looks at you and says, now go. Notice he says, go into all the world and preach the gospel. It's called the Great Commission. We see that at the end of Mark 16. We see it at the end of Mark 28. See it at the end of Luke 24. And we see it in John chapter 21. At the end of Jesus' life, the thing that he continues to say again and again and again is go and make disciples. Go and preach the word. Then in Mark 16, he says, and these signs will follow you as you do that. In my name, you'll cast out demons. In my name, you'll lay hands on the sick. All of these incredible things that God wants to do through us is accomplished by saying yes to his mission. Say, God, I want to see you do miracles. Like, okay, get on mission. God, I want to see your hand involved in my life. Great, do what I've asked you to do. Don't sit back and just pray for it. Be involved in seeing my will come to earth. It's easy to sit back and be like, come on, God, do the God thing. It's different when God stares you in the face and says, I want to do all of that. Will you go for me? I want to see your family saved. I want to see that person healed. I want to see that person off of drugs. I want to see that homeless person find purpose and destiny and get out of the struggle they're in. I want to do a lot of things, and I'm looking at you and I'm looking at all the people that could do something about it and say, will you accomplish my mission? God has a lot of things he wants to do, but he's decided to do them through you. This is why in Matthew 4:19 it says this. Jesus looks at some people and he says this. He says, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Notice he doesn't say, follow me for 8 years and I'll train you really well. And then at the end of those 8 years, you can finally do something kind of, sort of, a little bit for me. There's this story in the New Testament. There's a guy, it's called the madman of Gadara. He was demon-possessed, and he was cutting himself, and he had all kinds of bondage. Jesus cast the demons out of him, sets him free. He's in his right mind. He's clothed. The guy looks at him and says, let me follow you. Let me be your disciple. And Jesus says, no, go tell everyone what I did for you. Because the moment you follow Jesus is the moment you get invited into ministry. Follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. God, let me follow you. He said, no. I appreciate you wanting to follow me and be my disciple. Why don't you just go tell everyone what I did for you? You don't need a degree to be used by God. You simply have to tell people what he did for you. Amen. He says, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. I love this also in Matthew 22:14. It says that many are called, but few are chosen. Talking about your destiny, your purpose, your calling. The many are called, few are chosen. How do you go from being called to being chosen? If you look up that word, it's many are invited, few are selected. How do you go from being invited to selected? All you have to do is say the simple word, yes. Many are called, few are chosen. Many are invited, few are selected. How do you go from being called to being chosen to invited to being selected? You just simply say yes to his invitation. Yeah. So many times I think we sit back and it's like, God, use me. God, I want to do this incredible thing. Like, God, there's all these things I want to see. There's all these things I want to see. It's like, God's like, just say yes. Just say yes. Amen. Just say yes. It's not hard to be used by God. You just have to give him your yes. See, I think sometimes we don't respond to God's call for one of multiple reasons. We'll get to a lot of these later, but I think one of the reasons we don't say yes to Jesus is because what we feel like he's asked us to do either feels too big or it feels too small. Sometimes what we feel like God's asking us to do feels so big we don't know how to take a step forward. Like, I'll never be that, God. I'll never do that. That seems so big. But sometimes we don't say yes to Jesus because, God, that seems too small. Do you know who I am? And that's what you want me to do? You just want me to be a greeter and serve? Yeah, when you're faithful with little, you become ruler over much. Yeah. That's how things work in the kingdom. Yeah. You just want me to help that person, help my neighbor, invite that person? That's all you want me to do? Yeah. Yeah, I actually just want you to be faithful with little. Oh, I got a lot in mind, but you got to be faithful with what I've given you first. Sometimes a lot of us have a lot of plans, a lot of destinies, a lot of purposes, but we don't have a lot of towels because we don't like to serve. The invitation to significance is an invitation that begins by serving. That was free. But a lot of us, we get hindered by, God, what you asked me to do is too big. God, what you asked me to do is too small. And it doesn't matter what part on the team he's asked you to play. He just wants you on the team. And here's the struggle for some of us. A lot of us would rather have a primary role on a losing team than a secondary role on a winning team. And I would say it's more important to win than to look good. I want to be on a winning team. I don't care if that's moving chairs. I want to be on the winning team. I don't care what my role is. If I have to serve a bunch of kids, we're going to reach St. Louis for Jesus. I don't care if I get to be the greeter opening the door or occasionally I get a microphone. I don't care what my position is. I want to see St. Louis won for Jesus. I want to be a part of a church that makes it difficult for people to go to hell. I want to make it hard for people in St. Louis to find their way far from God and into hell. I want them to fight their way away from God, and they have to crawl over every single one of us because we decide we will be the light of the world, a city on a hill that cannot be shaken. I pray that we're that church that if you're going to find your way away from God, oh, you're going to have a bunch of people pray for you. You're going to have a bunch of people bless you. You're going to have a bunch of people serve you. You're going to hear about Jesus every single time you walk outside because there's a group of people that have given Jesus their yes. That's what I want to be a part of. That I want to see heaven full and I want to see hell empty. That I want to be a part of the move of God moving his mission forward. And I don't care what my role is. I just want to be on the team that's making a difference. Amen. I'd rather win than look good. I'd rather make a difference than make a name for myself. I'd rather make Jesus famous than gain a bunch of followers. And how we do that is we just give Jesus our yes. See, there's this idea, let me give you an analogy. There's this idea I think a lot of us struggle with. Has anyone ever been on a cruise? Anybody? You been on a cruise? Okay. I've been on one cruise my whole life, one cruise. And the reason I've only been on one cruise is because I had just gotten saved. I went on a cruise with my parents, my grandparents, and my little brother. So it wasn't this great experience, especially because I had just gotten saved. I felt trapped on a party that I couldn't participate in. It's like, follow Jesus, give up all your partying. I'm like, yay, hang out with grandma. I'm like, at least they got a buffet. I'm going to eat my sorrows away, you know? Give me another cake. This sucks, you know, like this. But what I noticed about a cruise is that a cruise, it's designed for your entertainment and your pleasure. It's like you're the star of the show in the cruise. That everywhere you go, it's like they're always trying to serve you, help you, entertain you, give you something new to do. And there's all these like activities, there's all these stops, and you get to do all this fun stuff. There's all this food everywhere, 24/7. You get room service, and it's included. You don't even have to pay for it. And it's like that whole thing is designed for you, your preference, and your entertainment. Here's the struggle. Many of us bring that mindset into the church, and we think the church is here for our entertainment and enjoyment. The church isn't here for you. You are the church, and you are here for the world around you. The church isn't for your preferences. The church is for your equipping. An invitation to be a part of a church was never an invitation to an event. It was an invitation to be a part of a mission. And this is why people say silly things sometimes like, you know, I just didn't get anything out of worship. I just didn't get anything out. I didn't like the songs. I didn't get anything out of worship. And I'm like, well, I'm glad you didn't get anything out of worship because we weren't worshiping you. That's a little punchy. I'm sorry. I've had too much caffeine. Forgive a brother. We gather together to worship one who has the name that is above every name. And that it's at his name that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. And we worship him. And we come here to gather to be equipped to help other people find and follow Jesus. It says, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Many are called, few chosen, many invited, few selected. You just say yes to Jesus. Because the church is not the Carnival cruise ship. The church is more like the Coast Guard. We're not a cruise ship, we're a rescue ship. Why? Because there's a lot of people dying, and God's plan to save them is his church. It's almost like God specifically called us in the midst of darkness to be a great light. And here's my question. What would it look like if all of us just said yes? Me? Yeah, you. John, what would it look like if you said yes? Sarah, what would it look like if you said yes? Sam, what would it look like if you just said yes? Me? Yeah. What would it look like if you just said yes to Jesus? You gave him a blank check that you just said yes. Elise, what would it be like if you just said yes to Jesus? What would this city look like? What would this church look like if every single one of us gave Jesus our yes. I think about that every now and then, and I just get blown away at the amazing things you and I would see if we all got on board with the rescue ship and we just said yes. But this is what I know to be true. Call me a prophet. The moment you feel called by God to do something, let me tell you what tomorrow is going to be like. You're going to get emotional in this moment, I hope. God's going to speak to you in this moment, I hope. You're going to say yes to Jesus. It's going to be this great euphoric experience. Some of you at the end of service, you're going to hear God's voice for the very first time. You don't even know what it sounds like. And you're going to hear his voice like one standing behind you saying, this is what I want you to do. But what would it look like if we all just said yes? What would it look like if you said yes and I said yes and we all just said yes? But this is what is going to happen. After you give Jesus your yes, Monday's going to happen. And whether your own insecurities or the voice of the enemy, you're going to come up with all of these excuses as to why you can't be used by God to do what he's already asked you to do. You're going to look in the mirror and you're going to say, but you don't know me. You don't know my past. You don't know my issues. You don't know my struggles. You don't know what I did last week. You don't know what I did last month. You don't know my family history. You don't know my baggage. You don't know my problems. Whether, again, your own insecurities or the voice of the enemy, you're going to hear all of these excuses as to why God can't use you. Moses had all these excuses as well. Moses had excuse after excuse after excuse. And you're going to hear all of these on your way home, tomorrow morning, later this week. And if you're going to be used by God, you have to overcome your excuses. I had a football coach, Coach Primo. He said this. I love him. He was talking about excuses. He said this. It was a famous Coach Primo phrase. He said, excuses, they are like behinds. Because everybody's got them, and they all stink. He said it a little more colorfully than that. But it's true. You have an excuse. I have an excuse. Many times our excuse is really a lie that we believe, but we justify our inaction because we'd rather have an excuse than make a difference. It's a lie. Your excuse as to why God can't use you, it's a lie that you believe, and every lie you believe is a bondage you carry. But Jesus says you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So Moses had some excuses. What's yours? I'm going to list 4 that Moses had. I think all of us, in some way, have similar excuses. Here's the first one. Excuse number 1. He basically says, God, I'm not able to do what you asked. That God comes and says, hey, I've called you to lead the people and set them free. And he says, who am I that I should do that? He hears God's call, and he immediately looks inward and says, who am I to do that? And I love God's response. He doesn't even entertain Moses' excuse. He just says, but Moses, I will be with you. Who are you? You're someone with God on their side. But I can't. You're not alone. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. But if he's called you to it, he will equip you for it. And he'll be with you. Moses' second excuse, he basically says, I don't know God well enough. He says, if you send me to the people of Israel, they're going to ask, who is this God that sent you to speak on his behalf? And he says, I don't know his name. What am I supposed to say? I don't know you that well. How can I be used by you if I don't even know you that well? And God says, tell him this. Tell him, I am is with you. I am sent you. What does that mean? He's saying, I am all that you need. I am your peace. I am your strength. I'm the one who equips you. I'm the one who calls you. I'm the one that walks with you. I am all you need. Who sent you? I am. What does that mean? It means I'm with you. It means I'm for you. And if God be for you, who can be against you? Here's this other excuse Moses has in Exodus 4:1. It says, Moses says, they're not going to believe me. His excuse says, others aren't going to support me. I don't have people cheering me on. Every time I try to take a step forward, no one is there to help me. And again, God's response is this like broken record. He's like, what? This one he actually says, what's in your hand? At that point, Moses had a staff in his hand. God walks him through 3 miracles. And what God is trying to communicate to Moses, he's saying, what you have is enough if I work on it and empower you with it. So what's in your hand? I'll anoint that. The thing that you think it disqualifies you, God says, put my spirit on that and I'll use it. What's in your hand? What do you have? Your gifts, your talents, your abilities. Is let my spirit fall on that and watch what I do with it. What you think is a broken dysfunction about you, God can actually anoint to use you to help other people with that same broken issue and mess. The last thing he says, God, I can't speak well. And I love God's response. Sometimes I just think God has some attitude. Maybe it's just my sarcastic, condescending nature. But anyway, he says this. Moses says, I can't speak well. And God goes, dude, who made your mouth? And that just summarizes all of our excuses. God, you don't know my weaknesses. You don't know my struggles. You don't know my past. You don't know my dysfunctions. You don't know my sin issues. You don't know my family history. And God's like, hang on a second. I'm God, and in case you forgot, I actually know everything. And there is nothing about you that confused me. I did not learn anything with your rebuttal. I knew that, and I chose you anyway. I picked you. I called you. I appointed you. That I will actually fall on you. And what you thought was a weakness actually just makes you dependent. And if you're dependent upon me, I'll use you in incredible ways. I don't need your perfection. I need your dependence. I don't need your gifts, and I don't need you other than you just to say yes. If you say yes, you'll be shocked what I do through you. I love this passage in 1 Corinthians. It says this. It says, consider your calling, brothers, that not many of you are wise according to worldly standards. Not many of you are powerful. Not many of you are from noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in this world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in this world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in this world, even the things that are not, to bring to nothing the things that are. In verse 29, and all of that, it says, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. All of that to say, you know why God chose you? Because you're not qualified. You know why God chose you? Because you have a colored past. You know why God chose you? Because you got a little gangster that you can't get out. You know why God picked you? So that when he uses your life, that the other people who see it will say, God must be at work in them because they couldn't do it. God chose to use you with your problems. Why? Because he gets the credit for it instead of you. God doesn't choose you because you're perfect and got it all together. Thank God for your giftings and your callings. Thank God you are good at things. But he doesn't need all of that. He just needs your yes. He doesn't need your perfection. All he needs is your obedience. All he needs is your yes. Here's my last thought. We'll close. Expect God's power to show up when you take a step of faith. Expect it. I love this Old Testament story with Moses because, every time you turn around, God's doing some miraculous thing. He speaks to Moses in a burning bush. He parts the Red Sea. There's 10 plagues. He feeds them miraculously manna from heaven. Moses hits a rock. Water comes gushing out. I mean, fire comes down from heaven. There's a pillar of cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night. It's like everywhere you look, there's miracles. Everywhere you look, God is just miraculously showing up as this incredible thing. And what I'm telling you is Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The miraculous workings of God didn't stop when Jesus ascended into heaven. And that's why in Acts chapter 1 and verse 8, it says this. It says, and you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. But it doesn't stop there. It says, and you will be my witnesses. God's power shows up when you're doing it for his mission. God's power is not for our enjoyment. God's power is for our mission. God's power is not for us to have good church services. God's power is for us to seek and to save that which is lost. You know, I was early in ministry. I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I've been in ministry for about a year or two. And me and my friends, we were always trying to just do radical things for God. We're always just trying to do like, what's the crazy thing we can do for God? We're always trying to push ourselves. There's just this thing in my personality that I'm extreme. I don't really do anything halfway. I'm either like all in or all out. I either love it or it's the stupidest thing in the world. Like there's really no middle ground with me. It's either like you killed it or you are awful. You know, like there's really, pray for the staff I work with. But anyway, it's either like you are killing it or it's either all or nothing. It's black or white. It's just like I'm just an extreme person. And so I was always trying to do these extreme things for God. And so me and my friends, we got together one night, and we would regularly do this, but we were like, what radical thing can we do for God? And so we decided it would be a great idea to go into like one of the worst cities in Baton Rouge, or one of the worst parts of Baton Rouge, late at night on a Friday and go tell people about Jesus outside of bars. And we regularly did this. This kind of dysfunction or whatever you want to call it in my personality is why I was a missionary in Africa for 6 months. It's why I've preached the gospel in the streets to thousands of people. That's why I lived in a very poor part of town and my house got broken into 9 times in a year and we kept serving our community. I want to do something for God. I want to do something for God. I want to do something for God. So me and my 3 friends, we go up to this bar in the middle of a part of town we shouldn't have been in, 1 o'clock in the morning on a Friday. And we're like, let's go tell people about Jesus outside this bar. So me and my 2 friends, Dante and Preston, we walk up, and as we walk up to this bar, 2 guys walk out of the bar. They're some big dudes. And it's late at night, and the last thing when they want to talk about, would you like to talk about your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ? You know? And they're like, shut up, you want a beer? And I'm like, I'm just like, this ain't gonna go well, but let's try it, Who knows? Maybe God sent us here for such a time as this. And so my friend, he starts talking to this guy about Jesus, and back then, we would do this like script. And the script went something like this. You'd go up to someone and be like, hey, have you ever heard of the good person test? Like, no, never heard. Like, it's 4 questions. Can I give you the good person test? The guy's like, I guess I'm out here smoking. You got until I'm done with the cigarette. And so my buddy says, well, question number 1, do you think you're a good person? And everyone with a good person test always says, yeah, I'm a good person. He's like, oh, okay, yeah, me too, good person. So question number 1, you ever lied before? And the guy kind of looks at him like, where is this going, He's like, everybody lies. He's like, yeah, you're right. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Yeah, that's true. You ever told a lie? Yeah, I've told a lie. Well, what do you call someone who's told a lie? Well, you call them a liar. Okay, question number 2, you ever stolen anything? And this is like back in the day, like you on Napster, Sorry, all the boomers got that joke. Like, you ever stolen anything? You're like, yeah. What do you call someone who steals things? You call them a thief. All right. And this one would get all the guys, and this is kind of where you would flip the script. Like, you ever lusted after someone? All the guys are like, yeah, I do that all the time. So, well, Jesus said in the New Testament, if you've lusted after someone, you've already committed adultery in their heart. And so, according to your own admission, you're a liar, a thief, and an adulterate heart. And say today you were to die and stand before God, and that's the accusation against you. Why does he let you into heaven? So things got serious real quick. Like, I thought we were talking about being a good person, and now I'm going to hell. Like, what just happened? And so things get a little argumentative. Things digress quickly. My friend is like describing hell to him, And I'm just like, we had a lot of passion then. We didn't have much wisdom then. especially outside of a bar late at night. My buddy's telling him all the reasons why he's going to go to hell and how terrible hell's going to be. And I'm like sitting back, I'm like, oh, Lord, like my buddy, he's tiny. This other guy, he's homeschooled. And I'm about to get in a fight for Jesus. Went from telling him about Jesus to seeing if he wants to meet Jesus. Like, I don't know why we did this. I don't know. I'm sitting here like, I'm the only one who's ever been in a fight. Like, why did I do this to myself? But I feel like God in that moment gave me what we would call a prophetic word, or God just speaks to your heart for a person in a situation, and he did that. And so God gives me this prophetic word for this guy. And I said, hey, guys, I haven't talked much here yet. I just feel like God wants me to tell you something. And I looked this guy in the face, and there's two of them. I said, here's the deal, man. I'm like, you've been running from God for years, and you're called to ministry, and you know it. You've been told that your whole life that you're called to ministry, and you've ignored it, you've run away from it, and God in this moment sent us here to tell you to stop running and do what he's called you to do. It was in that moment the guy takes off his sunglasses, hangs his head, looks at his friend, says, I don't know how this guy knows that, but my grandma every Sunday would take me to church when I was a kid. And she would tell me that God had a plan for me, that I was called to make a difference. I've been running from it for years. It was right then and there, Friday night, middle of the night, that him and his friend gave their lives to Jesus. And I don't tell you that story to impress you. I'm not the hero of that story. I tell you that story because many of you, you're the guy in the story. You know you're called to do something with your life. You know God's asked you to take a step. And for whatever reason, you've just said no. You've pushed it off. You've ignored it, tried to justify it. You've made excuses for why God can't use you. And I believe in this moment, God is saying to you, it's time for you to take a step of faith. And when you do, God will show up with his power, and he'll use you to make a difference in the world around you. So we're going to close service this way. I'm going to have our worship team come back up. We're just going to take a couple minutes, and we're going to worship. And what I want you to do is ask God one question. And I believe as you do, God's going to speak to your heart. God's going to birth destinies and tasks, things that he just wants you to do. I just want you to ask God this simple question. Say, God, what do you want me to do? God, what opportunity do you want me to say yes to? God, what ministry should I say yes to? God, what step of faith are you asking me to take? God, what do you want me to do? Because I believe in this moment, God's going to speak to you. Because the moment Jesus asked you to follow him, he had a ministry in his mind. He had a people, he had a task, he had a thing that he wanted you to do. And he purchased you, he redeemed you, and he gave you a plan. And your job is just to say, here I am, send me. Just say yes. So let's do this. Let's have you all stand to your feet. We're going to worship for just a few minutes.